Welcome back to Marquee Backstage. I'm your host, Julie Milam. Following a brave path to music, this folk singer has become a beacon of artistry, perseverance, and calmness through the journey of life. Get ready to learn where he's been and where the music will take him next. This is John Dennis.
With a guitar on my shoulder and a stomach full of fear. They told me back in Freeburg, kid, that's where you're meant to be. But these streets are full of singers way more confident than me. So I lie awake and waiting for my legend to unfold. Imprisoned by the wisdom that fortune favors.
John, welcome to Marquee Backstage. We have a lot to discover today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you grew up in Illinois.
I did.
Tell us what life was like as a child in Illinois.
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Illinois, just outside St. Louis. It was a little farm town. My high school graduating class was like 100. We were only about 35 minutes out of St. Louis. But I think when people think of Illinois, they think Chicago and the metropolis, and it was quite a bit different than that. It was a lot of cornfields and wheat and kind of the small town mentality.
Right. A little more rural.
Yeah, certainly.
So what did you and your family do for fun?
Growing up with my parents, they were wonderful parents, but they too came from kind of humble Midwestern, various parts of Illinois backgrounds. And so, we did standard things, went to movies, and my parents worked outside a lot, so we would do those kinds of things, and then playing sports and going to school and that kind of thing. But I thought it was a kind of idyllic childhood, certainly not one that might be as exciting as others, but I like being from a small town. I know all the people there. It felt like home to me, and I enjoyed it.
So when did music first touch you?
It's interesting because growing up, I can remember my parents listening to music. But really, I started playing music as an alto saxophone player in the grade school band.
Okay.
Joined it in fourth grade and really did it just because my friends were doing it. Would not have described myself as a big music lover.
Okay.
But then when I was 13, I had tried out for the school baseball team and didn't make it. And sort of in that vacuum of heartbreak of my childhood dream, like falling apart in an 8th grade tryout, I actually was at a bookstore with my parents and came across a Beatles CD, the double Greatest Hits Red Early Years album, and we turned it on in the car, and my parents sang along with it, and something happened in that moment that I really just fell in love with music. And so within the next week, my parents bought me an electric guitar, and I just went full bore into it. It was the love of my life. Couldn't put it down. All I thought about was this guitar and the Beatles.
And it got you over your heartbreak for baseball.
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
I turned out to be at least a little more capable at music than I was at T-ball. But
What other support did you have in grade school, in middle school, and high school that kept you propelling towards this career?
Well, my parents, fortunately, have always been really supportive of music, even to this day. They take it really seriously, and, in the sense that they see it as an actual career path,
Yes.
which not everyone does. But they were always super supportive. I had some great music teachers early on. And then, interestingly, in high school, there was a coffee shop that opened up with the idea of making it into music would come through, and we would ride our bikes there after school every single day, and we were always there. And they had this circular booth in the center, and we would just sit there and devour live music. And it was mostly songwriters, and you got exposed to everything. I mean, and you saw great performers, and it's a small setting. It just was awesome, and music was what made our hearts beat.
Takes away as my hope gets slowly swallowed by the sand. in the space between who I wanna be and who I am. So I dress myself in modesty like some hand-me-down velour, for carved into my family trees don't shine until you're sure. But I know there must be more to me than a martyr or cliche, whose unassuming tombstone reads tomorrow's a new day. And would I rise above my worry, take my courage off the shelf? It's so hard to be somebody when you barely know yourself. Some days I am a castaway, enslaved without a choice. And sometimes I am a lion who's afraid of his own voice. So I hide in cautious silence, trying to find the right refrain, the words to make me sure enough to stand. But all the while the hourglass that I'm trapped in ticks away, as my hope gets slowly swallowed by the sand. In the space between who I wanna be, there's so much space between who I wanna be and who I am.
So did you ever play at Perks?
I did, yeah. I played Perks a number of times throughout the years. The first one came pretty early. A friend of mine and I had been there playing guitar one weekend, and Margie, the owner, asked if we wanted to play one night. And so we decided to like stay up all night and try and learn some songs finally. And
So your confidence started to build at that point.
for sure, yeah, it felt like I could actually sing, and it's you're vulnerable. I mean, that's the cliche, like singing
Right.
in front of people. And so to actually do it in a small town where everyone knows who you are, and like you're not going to be able to hide from kids at school the next week or other families, and to have it go well enough that people were kind of surprised by it was an important moment for me.
Of course, it was
Yeah.
a pivotal moment. So where else did you gain your confidence and your support in your music career?
Well, I mean, that friend Mason was a guitarist in a band I was in all through high school, which was the Still Montgomerys. And so that was hugely important. And then another really significant relationship at that time was with my girlfriend through high school, Adrian.
Okay.
Adrian was in the band, the high school band, and played trombone, but was like kind of the notorious biggest Beatles fan on the planet.
There's the connection.
I was an eighth grader into high school and a boy, and like had been interested in Adrian from afar, and we were in drama club together. And I remember the first time we talked was after a band performance, and she was wearing a George Harrison t-shirt, and I remember walking up and saying, "Oh, George was my favorite Beatle," thinking that was going to open the door, and she just kind of like seriously said, "Well, I like John the best." And like that was the end of it. But she was amazing, and just this incredible soul who loved music, was in an all-girls Beatles tribute band at that time back then. And, we sort of started hanging out in drama and realized that we had a connection and started dating. I think we had that kind of almost Springsteen dream of kind of music taking the two of us to the heights. And so it's hard to say that anyone was more influential than Adrian for my music at that time.
So how did you leave behind home start your new life in Nashville. Where did Adrian fit in?
Yeah, so I graduated high school and Adrian and I stayed together. I think that's always a question. But actually, she and I got a lot closer when I left. But, Adrian was my bedrock. She was the person that just loved me for me, loved me better than I loved myself. There was no question that we probably would have ended up together.
You say that past tense.
I was driving home to meet up with her. It was like my first actual break, my first semester of school. And she texted me and said, hey, if you're going to be home early, I will go to your parents' house and wait for you there. But if you're not, I'm going to go with our mutual friend Taylor, and we're going to go set up for some dance he was doing. And the reality was I was actually going to get home early. But I had just been in this kind of space where I felt like sentimental, like I wanted to spend a couple hours with just my parents and then meet up with Adrian. And so I told her, no, I won't be home early. Go set up with the dance. And she went and set up, and they were in a car accident, and she was killed.
You're 18 years old. You don't even know how to deal with life yet.
No. I mean, I've always imagined it like you're stepping out into this grand old world, and then you're just kind of shanked by life within the first couple weeks. So when I was thinking about telling the story, I was like, it really wasn't like the thing got derailed immediately. It was this really slow motion train wreck. It was like, this has happened, but you don't quite believe that it's happened. You're only 18. And then I went through this phase where I just thought I was probably going to die. Like I thought, okay, well, the universe will only give me 2 more years of this. Like at some point I'll fall apart and get to go be with Adrian, whatever that looks like. And then it set in. You're 18 years old. You've got a long life ahead of you. And there's nothing you can do to get her back. Mm-hmm. And you can, drive yourself to the ends of the earth, trying to come up with some reason or answer for this that makes you feel like there was a purpose to this wonderful light being snuffed out. And I almost destroyed myself looking for it. And one of those ways was telling myself that if I had only just not lied to her on the phone, then she'd have made it. And it took me until many years later when I was sitting in a rehab facility for alcoholism that had developed out of this whole trajectory that someone finally was able to look at me and say, you realize that if you'd told her the truth, the same thing would have happened. The truth was you wanted to go home and hang out with your parents for 2 hours. And it just, really kind of like, I think I always knew that, but I think it's so much easier as human beings to like blame ourselves for something, even if it's ridiculous, than to say horrible things happen and there's not a clear reason for them.
Oh, God draws the lines, I just color them in. It's always been a picture book story. Oh, you never can lose if you only can win. Since we all get a mansion in glory. Since we all get a mansion in glory. Oh, love, don't you know today it's the same as we met way back when we danced in the dirt and wore Beatles t-shirts and we ran with our backs to the wind. And it didn't take long till I told you I was frightened to let a girl in. But after kissing my cheek, you proceeded to speak, and while grinning your innocent grin, you said, God draws the lines, I just color them in. It's always been a picture book story. Oh, you never can lose if you only can win. Since we all get a mansion in glory. Since we all get a mansion in glory.
And so I think for about 2 years at Belmont following Adrian's death, I kind of was like living in this surface level, still not really accepting it had happened, because I was under the impression that I would, be freed from this life and get to return to heaven.
How'd you use songwriting? I mean, that's your passion too. So how did songwriting help you through that time?
I mean, the thing I would say is that of all the different roads I've been down, music has been the one thing that's always been there with me, and there have been periods in my life where I thought it was time to shift focus. So I think by my junior year, I found a couple friends at college who were sort of like me, I think, felt sort of outside-ish, but deep and sensitive, and we started drinking together, and that really replaced my love of music, was my love of alcohol. And I think in reality it was a suicide attempt. I think I thought that I could sort of destroy myself slowly without hurting everyone around me doing it this way. And by the time I was getting out of Belmont, I mean, I was showing up to classes in various states, and that's a dry campus, and I think they just looked the other way because they knew I was a senior and knew what I'd gone through. But I mean, it was pretty clear by that point that I had a major drinking problem. And so following college, I continued to live with those friends, and I graduated in 2014. And since Adrian's death, every January we would do a Beatles tribute night for her. But this particular year, 2015, I showed up to it and was blackout drunk, and it all kind of caught up to me, and that's what I mean by a slow motion train wreck. It started out with kind of this like, oh, well, you'll see her in heaven, like it's going to be okay. And then it just sort of was like, no, you're only 20 and you feel really lonely and you're in a place you've never been and you can't deal with anything. And now you're drinking, and it sort of just got to that January. And so with it happening in front of Adrian's friends and family, it really reaffirmed to me that the drinking and the self-destruction was not something that was honoring Adrian's memory like I told myself. So I ended up the next week in Cumberland Heights, a rehab facility in Nashville, did 30 days there, turned 23 in treatment, got out of treatment, went right back to drinking. And then by June 4th, I had drank myself to a point where I woke up that day and said, this is the last day, like I'm going to end it today. And I'd reached the end. And I texted somebody that I'd met in treatment the first time and said, hey, I need to talk. And he didn't even ask questions. He just said, where are you? And he showed up at my house and found me in that state and convinced me that it was time to go get help again, and went back to treatment a second time in June. Doctors told me I had about a week before I would have drank myself to death, and at 23, and did 30 days that time and had hit rock bottom. And so when I got out of treatment that time, I went to a halfway house where I lived for 6 months, which is not something I wanted to do, but I just thought, I've reached the end of my life. Like, everything from here is bonus. You may as well give it a shot and do it a different way. And so out of that, I started working at Michael's Arts and Crafts and started picking up the guitar again and just kind of writing about those experiences. I just let music sort of be my nourishment for a while. And from there, I've remained sober. I mean, and it wasn't all easy from that point on, but I think that was the point in which I started to realize, like, no, you have a long life to live and you get to make the most of it. For a long time, I really got hung up on the difference between moving forward and moving on and forgetting. And I think I'm in a place where I remember Adrian really fondly.
Your life didn't end that day.
It didn't, and a part of me definitely did, and I hate that it happened that way, both for Adrian and for who I was at that moment, but I'm proud of who I am today. I'm proud of the life that I have, and I don't think that I would be anywhere near where I am now if I hadn't endured and proven to myself that I could survive.
it seems like your weeping just deepens the rain. Well, I've been there before, and we're in this together, and just maybe someday we can laugh at the pain. So close your eyes, little darling. Hope is nothing to fear. Close your eyes, go to sleep till the morning. My love will be waiting right here. It's hard to believe there is someone beside you when this darkness inside you feels like all you can hold. Even when you can't see love, I sing to remind you that sometimes salvation means just letting go.